Okay, so welcome back for another episode of Legal Unicorns. And this week I am absolutely delighted to be joined all the way from Hong Kong, my former home, by Martinus Steyn, who is a gentleman that I've got to know over the years and have kept in semi-touch with, but obviously have seen how his career has been growing in Hong Kong, and as a South African, originally a South African lawyer, but very much a South African living overseas. I'm going to be asking him about himself and his background and his career to date, but we all know, anybody who listens to this and anybody who listens to any of the content that we put out, the most popular question from South African lawyers and other lawyers based on the African continent is how do I move overseas? That's the one question I get asked every week more than anyone else. So we thought it would be a good time to get Martinus, someone who's done it successfully, although I know not without putting in the hard yards, to answer some of those questions as well. So first and foremost, Martinus, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to join you on the podcast.
Brilliant. Well, look, I like I said, you are a dual South African and Hong Kong admitted solicitor, specialising I know at the moment in the dispute space with commercial law, working for the fantastic JC Legal, I believe, Hong Kong law firm that also operates out of Malaysia and I believe the UK as well. But you can tell us a little bit more about that in a minute. But for full disclosure, actually, your family is quite well known to my in-laws, isn't it? I mean, we have that connection. Yes. where I believe my father-in-law and your father know each other from the law days. There's a lot of lawyers in your family, but as there is in my in-laws. If you could just introduce me and the guests to your background, where you started, where you were born, and how it all came about.
Well, I am a Cape Townian, Rob, and I actually grew up a few streets away, I think, from where you now live. So it's a small world in that sense. I was actually born into a legal family. My mother was an advocate, later a High Court judge. My father was a lawyer as well, himself, an attorney, sort of, I think in the corporate commercial space after first working in shipping law. One of my sisters is also a partner at one of the big 5 law firms of South Africa. And then further back, my granddad on my father's side was actually a judge of the appeal court in the Free State. So I guess you can say it runs in the family. And
yes.
When I grew up, when you sort of have to decide what you want to pursue as a career, I was always more into things like music, acting, and writing. The creative arts. I always liked to express myself through those things. I found them fun. I found I had a natural knack for it. More than necessarily sitting behind a desk reading all day and studying. However, my mother was very smart and she actually convinced me that half of the law is actually, the story that you tell. Assembling the facts of a case, obviously making a narrative through that, and then analyzing the law that flows and follows the facts. So I have seen that happen in real life when I appear before a judge or a magistrate. It is a bit of an acting performance, and also drafting your papers, you have to be creative in the way that you logically present, your client's case.
Yeah.
I went to university at Marty's at Stelly's, the wine country, which I really enjoyed for my undergrad. It was an interesting experience in the sense that I also did economics and philosophy along with my legal subjects. So at one stage, I was actually maybe considering an honors in philosophy as a subject rather than, pursuing the legal route further. And, to which my father responded, "So what do you want to be one day, a philosopher then?" So the practicalities surrounding that made me see through my uh, law school at Marty's. Then after which I had to decide what I was going to do, in terms of articles. As a small aside, before that, actually, in my final year of studies, I had the opportunity, to be the manager of a music shop, which was called Marshall Music. So I could find a bit of time for my passion in music to sell electric guitars, the DJ equipment, things like that. And that actually helped me in the future, which I will let you know later. But that was my little sales experience and management experience before I actually joined the professional world. Then every law student needs to sort of decide what route they want to take. Are you going to go, the big route, the corporate route, where you have to specialize super early on? Or will you join a smaller firm or a medium-sized law firm where you get exposure on a wide range of issues? However, the clients that you deal with aren't, 100% of the time, the glamorous ones that you do get at the larger firms, although we did have some very large clients. So for that reason, I opted, to join a smaller firm, actually, uh, HKVG attorneys in the Cape Town area, very, very close to the High Court and the Magistrates Courts. And that's where I really cut my teeth in the practical legal sense. I'm sure a lot of your guests have said this before, but it was very interesting to see the difference between studying law and actually doing the practical part of it. Practicing law was a whole other world. I actually really enjoyed it much more than just the legal analysis every day at uni. It was really fun to go to magistrates court to do section 65s, to do maintenance law cases, and also just to do admin in the high court, where you can then sit in on the cases that run before high court judges. At the same time, I was then thinking about the future, and I thought I'd like to see if I can work abroad one day. I'd never lived abroad before, I'd never worked abroad, but some of my friends had already started moving to places like London, Sydney, New York, etc. And I thought that's a world I'd like to experience, at least, even if I would move back home one day, to get some more exposure. And I started researching and found out that what most overseas employers seek is a master's degree. So I hit up UCT whilst I was doing my articles, and I was looking for a hard science master's degree. And I thought maybe I should look at the tax law as something to pursue, because it's something that's internationally very sought after. Not necessarily the most exciting field, but sometimes the boring ones are what really get you noticed. And so that's when I started, the 2-year master's degree. Whilst I was doing my articles, I got admitted as an attorney of the High Court of South Africa at the same time, finished my master's degree, and for 1 year I was an associate in a department of my law firm that was notorious as one where all the miscellaneous cases sort of went through. This was probably the favorite year of my career, I think, because I really dealt with very, very wide-ranging sorts of clients, right? I would deal with large e-commerce clients in South Africa, all the way through to the man on the street that would walk into the office and say, look, this is the problem I have. I am leasing, a spot from a landlord. I'm like running a restaurant, but it looks like we're going under. How are we going to get out of the contract, for example, right? So that really makes you apply your mind. You learn new things every day. You navigate new sort of issues. And that's what I really enjoyed, because when you specialize, when you hyper specialize as an attorney, unless you're really right at the top, I don't really see the benefit of that for 90% of clients. Uh, you know, I think as a lawyer, it's already a specialist field, right? Unless you're doing,
Yeah.
conveyancing or something that's a completely separate form. I think a lot of these legal subjects really tie into each other and obviously really complement one another. So that's
Yeah.
the South African part. Yeah.
And I one of the things I picked up on there is that you joined a smaller firm. I mean, it's a firm that I'm aware of, and here in Cape Town, and it is interesting because it's something that we're often asked, or I'm often asked over the years, is whether it's a hindrance or whether it helps lawyers to have worked and done their articles at a smaller firm. And I often say it can help if the firm is busy, because for a number of reasons. Firstly, because you kind of get thrown into the deep end, or you can do, and you can get more responsibility than you might get at a larger firm. And also there might be variation in terms of the type of work that you're doing, especially once you've actually finished your articles and become an associate. And also, just over the years when I'm recruiting more senior attorneys for the bigger international groups, they typically like to have seen a lawyer who's come from a smaller background, because they've maybe taken on more responsibility earlier, they've run deals earlier. There's a lot to be said for working at a busy, smaller firm. So,
Yes, that's agreed.
but that takes us up to around about 2019, which
Yes.
was, for all of us, is the last year before it went completely mental, and COVID interrupted our lives. But so you obviously got in the back of your head, or maybe certainly moving forward to the front of your head, I want to move abroad. I want to go and see the world. I want to test myself in a different market. So how did that all start, and how did Hong Kong come around?
Yeah. That's an interesting one, Rob, because Hong Kong was never actually somewhere I looked at on my own. I was looking at London, to be honest, because of, the cultural similarities. The time zone is more or less the same. I've heard that a lot of my friends have slotted in there relatively sort of easily. And so I applied to various roles there, had a few sort of interviews as well. And then one day, just out of the blue, there was a recruiter that actually contacted me on LinkedIn and said that they had a client in Hong Kong in financial services looking for legal counsel role. So I would have to move in-house for this role. And here's where the kicker comes in. They said the client was looking for someone with experience in sales, as well as the tax background that I had with my master's degree. So I
And
thought,
hence
wow,
where
this is...
the music shop experience came in
Yes, so
handy.
that's where the music shop experience came in handy, because, oh yeah, I had actually sold for a whole year before. And then I had the legal experience with some understanding of, the tax implications of international deals and citizenship, etc. So I said, look, why not? Let's have an interview. And as you know, Rob, the pace of life in Hong Kong is so much faster than in South Africa, right? Sometimes more so than I would like as a Cape Townian who does enjoy the more laid back lifestyle sometimes. And I had an online interview with, I think, HR at that point. The next day, I had an online interview with who would have been my, direct line manager, and the following day with, the chairman of the group. So within 3 days, I had 3 interviews, and after that interview with the chairman, he basically said, "Well, when would you be able to come over? We'd like you as soon as possible." That was quite a shock to the system, because I was so used to things taking their time. I only had a few days to make my decision as well, which is such a big decision, seeing as I'd never been in Hong Kong, I'd never worked or lived abroad. This would be a very big step. But it was also the same weekend of the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens. And I remember watching the Rugby Sevens with my dad on, the TV, and he thought for a while and he said, you have 3 decisions here. Number one, you can stay where you are and you'd move up the ranks smoothly, but you will always wonder what if, and you might regret that decision. Secondly, you can always become an advocate if you want to work for yourself, work in the courts, but that will always be an option that's available for you. whether you want to pursue it 5 years down the line or 1 year down the line. Or number three, you have to take that leap of faith and you move over to Hong Kong, where adventure awaits. And after he put it that way, it was actually a no-brainer for me. And I confirmed it. Like you said, though, Rob, it was an interesting time because when I arrived in Hong Kong, it's when the protests in Hong Kong started, right, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that was already sort of a challenging sort of a time and environment, to arrive in Hong Kong in. But it was just such a dynamic city. I immediately fell in love with the place.
Yeah, I think just to interject there, because obviously anybody who's listened to the podcast will know that I spent 8.5 years living in Hong Kong before you and I maybe passed on the plane. You're heading to Hong Kong and I'm heading here. But for those to give a bit of context, Hong Kong, global city, for a very long time, the fifth largest economy in the world, very dynamic, very fast paced, very peaceful. Everything's geared up to work. Everybody works super hard, super long hours. And those protests that came around in sort of 2019 really were I wasn't there, but I know from friends who were there, that it was a real shock to the system because, and this podcast isn't to get into the rhyme or reason of whether it was the right, what was happening and politically, etc. But a very peaceful place, turned into a battlefield for a very long time, and it wasn't going anywhere, and it wasn't stopping. And I can imagine for you, having just arrived, it wasn't quite what you expected, maybe. It certainly wasn't, from looking on from afar and talking to our friends and colleagues and clients, people were bemused. There was just, this is not what Hong Kong is used to. So it must have been a tricky time. And it goes to show again, as a young professional, and many people will be listening to this, looking and thinking about your journey and thinking about their own journey going forward. Just goes to show that anything can happen, and you've got to be really adaptable, right?
Yes, for sure, Rob. I mean, the other thing was just the culture shock, moving from a dry climate like Cape Town, where we got 300 days of sunshine a year, right? Arriving here in Hong Kong in the middle of summer, where it's humid on such a level where when you leave your flat, you feel like you're swimming in soup, and it rains, for weeks on end sometimes. So that was definitely a very big shift in terms of lifestyle. And like you said, the very long working hours, but at the same time, you're also expected, to entertain clients very late into the night on weeknights, right? And now you're forced, in a sense, to drink wine until, let's say, midnight, and you're expected in at work at 9 a.m. fresh and ready to go the next day. So it's a very tough city, but it is a very interesting place to work, and the challenge is what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, I think again that can speak to lots of people who have moved abroad and maybe have struggled with cultural changes. But for anybody listening, or anybody who might be who may have followed a similar path to you and I in the past, or maybe thinking about Asia as a destination, I can tell you, and you can tell them, that we're talking about complete chalk and cheese between Cape Town and Hong Kong in terms of lifestyle. You've just mentioned climate, work style, expectations, smells, heat, the way you live your life, the way you pay your bills. Everything is completely and utterly different. It is east and west. It's completely different. And for you to have to deal with that, as well as settle into a new career, which was, again, going in-house, and having to deal with all the political issues that were going on and the riots and the streets, you must have... did you get to any point and sort of scratch your head and think, what am I doing? Should I be here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, Rob. Especially in the first few months, I think, right? Before you settle down and you make your friends and sort of, build up a support network here. in I guess September, October, 3 or 4 months in, my parents would be like, do you think you should stay? Might not have been the right time to go. It's always fine to come back. And I just thought, you know what? Let me see if I can stick it out for at least 1 year, and then we can rethink it, because it's such a big upheaval to move all the way here, right? And now you have to put down a deposit on an apartment. The apartments here, as you know, Rob, are very small and very expensive, right? And you have to sign a 1 year lease. I wasn't a rich man at that point either, so I put all my savings into that, to buy some furniture, etc. Like open a bank account, all those things. And I think the turning point was when I started making friends and newer
Yeah.
connections here, because this is the city where it's the easiest place to make friends and new connections, I think, that I've ever been to. You can meet someone on the street and you can talk to them, and they would introduce you to a mutual connection who might be able to help you out with work or something. The people are extremely open. That's another difference with South Africa, I think, where it's still very old school in the way that people deal with older referral networks. People aren't super open, to talking to people and just the next day sending you through a new job or anything like that. And so when that sort of gained steam, and I was, starting to make a few deals go through, the commissions come in, then you see, wow, this is a big financial center and it's fun. It's low tax. The beaches are here for when the sun does shine. You jump in a
Yeah.
taxi. Next moment, you're from a skyscraper right on the beach, and that's when I started to really enjoy it and think, wow, the balance is here. We started seeing much less of the protests as well, I must say. It was sort of confined, to specific areas. So where the press does make it seem a bit more out of hand than it is, and there were very bad instances at some like universities and downtown, it wasn't as disruptive on your day-to-day life as it would have been seen on the TV. But that's where the shift then started to happen, where many expats started to weigh up their options and maybe
Yeah.
leave back to the UK or sort of elsewhere. And that's where the business that I worked in, for me personally, started to dwindle a little bit. And I realized, I think I will need, to qualify as a Hong Kong solicitor so that I can take the next sort of, step in my career and open more doors.
Yeah, it's a clever idea. It's a really good decision on your part, because you'd moved out of practice into in-house, and as well as I do, and this is really just a lesson really for anybody listening, is that your journey overseas and your journey in your career is, you've got to keep giving yourself options. You've got to keep, you literally you don't have to keep moving forward super Hong Kong fast, but you have to keep moving forward. You have to keep thinking, how can I best prepare myself for the next of it change, or the next upheaval, or whatever it might be. And by getting starting on that process of becoming dual admitted, you open up other doors. You give yourself the chance to go back into practice or to stay in house, that for me, as an observer of what you were doing, it was a very sensible idea. Not easy, obviously, to become dual admitted, but
And
all
that
the
was
same.
right when the COVID pandemic actually broke out as well, Rob. So that's the second part. So
Yeah, I
six
shouldn't
months into
laugh
Hong
because
Kong, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
because
it's
it was
good to look
terrible.
back
But
and be able to laugh. But
yeah,
6 months in, to the Hong Kong adventure, and I've been settled in. I've made all my new friends. I've met my new girlfriend, who's now my fiance. And suddenly we hear
congratulations.
about this. Thank you very much. We've heard about this new virus that's taking over at that stage only Asia, right? And I start
Hmm.
seeing masks around me for the first time on a wide scale. And I know in Hong Kong, Rob, that sometimes when the people here are sick or they've got the flu, they might wear a mask out of courtesy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'd
it's fairly common.
seen
Yeah,
it
yeah, it's fairly common.
here and there, but then suddenly one day you just see 90% of the people masked up, and that's sort of the only exposure I had to that before was SARS, right? What I saw in the
Yeah, of
media
course.
before. And suddenly we're all masking up. We're not sure what the future holds. Is it going to be a few week thing, a few months thing? And even more, I think expats leave because Hong Kong had some measures that made it super difficult, to get in and out of the country. We had to do,
Yeah.
you had to stay in hotels for sometimes 7 days, sometimes 14 days, sometimes up to 3 weeks, to quarantine. It was just
Yeah, there
insane.
was that quarantine camp as well, wasn't there, in the New Territories, and yeah, it didn't look great,
Yes.
I must admit.
So that's when a lot of people got fed up. And
Yeah.
then I had to decide, look, am I going to stick it out or am I going to leave again? But and then I think I'm lucky that I had already registered for the overseas lawyers qualification exams at that point, because it was such a mission to register for them. That's not even writing them, just the application process was so strenuous that I thought, well, look, I might as well stay until the end of this year, see if I pass my exams, and then I can make another call.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of this conversation, and for the listeners as well, I was actually in Hong Kong in February of 2020, and obviously the lockdowns began in March, and I got one of the last flights out of Hong Kong on the Qatar Airways. It was still one of the weirdest flights of my life, because I think we were on an A380, one of the big ones, one of the huge ones, and there was four of us in economy. There was four people,
Wow.
and it was literally like, I remember talking to the travel agent, the person handling the flight, and she said, "You need to get on this plane. You need to get out." And so I got out and came back to Cape Town. But I remember being there at the time as well, and I've talked to other people about this fairly recently. Actually, we were talking about COVID and looking back. And when I was in Hong Kong, obviously I was there for a very long time, there was quite often little flare-ups in mainland China of little viruses. You'd see it in the news, didn't really take any notice of it. It would typically be in a city that you'd never heard of, in a province you've never heard of. And you kind of, just a byline, they've locked down something or other. This is, way back when. And then, so I remember when I was there, none of my friends were taking it particularly seriously. Like, it was kind of like, have you heard about this new virus? Sounds like it's pretty serious, but then immediately changed the subject. Little did we know that it would cause the entire world to shut down. But yeah, look, I mean, from a career perspective, you're still new. You're still, finding your feet. I think the point you just made there about making friends is something that is often overlooked. And in fact, I was talking to a lawyer the other day who's more senior in age, shall we say, and she's moving from South Africa for the first time next week, and she asked me for some advice, and I said, look, the only thing I can advise you on is, it isn't easy to make friends, because she's going to the UK, which is not an expat place like Hong Kong is, and it sounds harsh, but people don't need you. So it's not as easy to make friends. Whereas in Hong Kong, and Singapore and places like that, it's very well set up. Like you said there, you could literally meet someone on a night out or at a client event, and suddenly you're talking, and before you know it, you're seeing them on the following Saturday, and it's and that helps get into life. It helps you settle. It helps you get into the work easier. Whereas I found the complete opposite when I moved to your hometown of Cape Town. Cape Town, everybody knows, is a very notoriously difficult place to make friends and to settle in. Even if you're from the country, even if you're just moving from Joburg or Durban or somewhere like that, let alone being, Johnny Foreigner over here. And I actually really underestimated it. I've said it before. I underestimated it. How difficult it would be, but that's really just something for those professionals who are looking to move abroad to consider that, because it can be awfully lonely, and you really need that interaction to settle and to perform well at work and to make a home. So with you, so COVID hit. And you know, obviously people will look at you up on LinkedIn after this, and when this comes out, and they'll see that you were at the Sovereign Group, and then as that COVID year is kicking in, there's a bit of a gap. Were you studying
Yes.
for the exams, or what was happening then?
Oh, this is where the bureaucratic nightmare started, Rob. It was red tape extraordinaire. So at Sovereign Group, I made the decision that I had to qualify as a solicitor. So I started speaking with some law firms because I'd like to get my training whilst I was again, studying to the law exams here. Actually got a few offers, and I signed with a firm here, very good firm, international firm, actually, Charles Russell Speechlys. I was going to join, the private client sort of team. I met the whole office, was something like 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. I was very pleased, to sign on the dotted line. And they said, look, it's a formality now. We're just waiting for your visa transfer. And all law firm appointments here have to go through the Hong Kong Law Society, right? And the Law Society, comes back to us and says, hold on, he's already a South African admitted attorney, so he's overqualified for the legal manager position that you offered him, which should actually go to a local person first. And we're like, okay, so what's the solution to that? And they say, okay, you should register as a foreign lawyer. So what we have in Hong Kong is a title that's called registered foreign lawyer, where if you're a foreign lawyer in another jurisdiction like myself, you can register as one and work at a law firm here in Hong Kong as long as you're supervised by a lawyer from your home country.
Yes.
Or if you
Yes, I
have
remember
more
that,
than
yeah.
5 years experience in the practice of South African law. And now we're shaking our heads because we're saying, I only did 1 year of South African legal practice as an associate before I moved to Hong Kong. And there's not many South African lawyers working here in any firms. So registered foreign lawyer was out of the door, right? At that point, we started, grasping at straws and saying, but look, they just want to have me on board as low, position as I can until I finish my exams so that I can then obviously join as an associate. And the Law Society rejected that, actually. So after 6 months of letters back and forth, they told me, sorry, but you're not allowed, to join this law firm. Luckily, I'd
How did you
registered
feel?
for the...
How did
It
I
was
mean? How did
terrible,
that? You
Rob,
must have been
because,
gutted.
it's an expensive city to live in as well, Rob. So 6 months with no salary really drained the bank account. I was very lucky that my parents, supported me a little bit, obviously, during that time, and that I just had to downscale and live a very frugal life. But Hong Kong is a hectic city. When you put your feet out of the door, you spend 100 Rand easy, right? And I was really gutted. At that point, I also just thought, should I just come home? However, I thought, let's, stick through with these exams. Another problem then, obviously comes up where my Hong Kong work visa is 1 month away from expiring, which was not a problem initially because I'd signed at this new company, right? Now I think, okay, now I really have to make a plan. Whether I become a teacher for a while or if I, do something else, I just need a visa. And luckily, the Tried and Trust guys helped me out with a 3-month role there, a contract, which there's actually some South Africans who work there, at Trident. So I spoke to them.
I can't remember his name, but I used to live next door to one of them. I can't.
Yeah, De Bruin. There we go. Christian De Bruin, yes. Very nice guy.
Yeah. Very nice.
Super well informed. He basically runs, the trust sort of department for the guys here at Trident, which is a booming market, especially from the mainland. And he said, well, look, we've heard your situation and we have sympathy for it. And as a fellow South African, I would like to help you out so that you can at least stay and write your exams. We can't really take you on full time as the company is actually mostly local focused. So there's a bit of a language barrier there. That's something that I'll also come to in a bit which is happening more and more in Hong Kong. It's less international and more local. So it's much more
Yeah.
Cantonese and Mandarin focused than it used to be, sort of English back in the day. So you really have to find your niche. But sorry, just back to that. He then said, look, we'll help you out with the 3-month visa. So 3 months, pass. I write 5 exams for the overseas lawyers qualification exams on the trot. And I think there's no way that I pass all of them, because there's a conveyancing exam, which is actually, compulsory in Hong Kong, whereas in South Africa, it's a whole separate exam. And, conveyancing is notoriously difficult because it's whole own set of rules for, the property and real estate market, the transfer of housing. But Hong Kong's largest sector in the economy is the property market. It's the most expensive real estate by square foot in the world, by far.
Yeah.
So we finished the exams. I return home, to South Africa, which was lovely because I could see my family again for the first time in 18 months or something like that. And I thought, look, I'll wait for my exam results, which will take 3 months, and then I can again, for the 4th time, decide whether I want to go back to Hong Kong or stay in South Africa. I was lucky to join Edward Nathan Sonnenberg's ENS Africa on a 3-month contract as well, where I worked in their litigation department, which was amazing. George van Niekerk and the guys really gave me some really cool exposure to some high level cases. It reignited my love for litigation again, after working in financial services for such a long time. And I realized I do like the contentious side of work, obviously drafting pleadings, appearing in court, consulting with your clients, finding solutions for them. And so those 3 months went by and the exam results, come out. I woke up at 6 a.m. one morning. At home, I got the sort of email from the Law Society, and I thought, there's no way it's going to be a 5 out of 5 pass. And lo and behold, it was a 5 out of 5 pass. So I was very fortunate and lucky to have actually passed that. And, all my thanks goes to, my tutor, who assisted me through all this. Because in Hong Kong, there's no sort of syllabus that they actually give you to prepare for. So you don't get the materials. You have to ask someone who either served on the panel of the exams or other people who have actually passed it to help you with notes and the preparation and stuff. So then, I passed all 5 and I have to come back to get admitted as a Hong Kong solicitor.
Yay. Well done.
Yeah, so then fly back, have to quarantine for 7 days in a hotel here. And
of course, COVID's still going on, yep.
Yeah, put my application through, and the date is set that I go to court. It was a very special day, actually, because I don't know if you know the firm in Hong Kong, Howes Williams.
Yeah, of course, yep.
Yeah, yep. So Howes actually worked with my dad in London at Richard's Butler in 1980. Mr. Chris Howes, and my dad used to work
Chris
together.
Howes and Chris Williams as well, actually. They're both Chris's,
and also Chris Williams.
Yeah.
And so
they're very
small
good
world
fun.
again. Him and my dad used to work together in London, and he actually also helped me out with a bit of guidance during the difficult time with the exams. So I asked him whether he would move my application in High Court to be admitted as a solicitor. So that was a really special day. I get admitted.
Nice.
I once again now I decide if I want to go in-house or the private practice route. And I think at this point, you want to do private practice because that's where you really learn the nitty-gritty of foreign law, of how Hong Kong law works. So the Tanner DeWitt guys who work in insolvency saw that I had some insolvency experience from my DKVG days, and they actually gave me the opportunity to join them, which is arguably, I would say, the most renowned insolvency and restructuring firm in Hong Kong.
I don't think it's arguable. I think Ian DeWitt is a Hong Kong legal legend, and someone I've met many years ago a number of times. They're fantastic firm, and they do great work. It's a real, from a Hong Kong perspective, a really good brand to have on your CV. Really.
Yes. Insanely good work that they do, and with that also came just exposure, I think, which really leveled me up, in terms of very long hours, lots of documents to go through, learning on the job again, right? So I didn't do my articles in Hong Kong. So now I have to relearn the basics of the procedures here in High Court, etc. Working on, bankruptcy cases with lots of intricacies, the cross-border elements with a lot of the work, writing articles and also doing a lot of the business development side, which was a lot of fun as well. And
Yeah.
like you said, I worked with like Ian DeWitt on a one-to-one basis, and he was an amazing leader, and he actually taught me a lot as a coach. So I spent 1 year there, which I was also quite lucky to do a lot of work in the court and sort of like appearances. And then I just also realized I would like to broaden my horizon of exposure, right? Because once again, now I've specialized in insolvency and restructuring. Was that something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life? Not necessarily, right? I love, to be a bit more of a generalist. That's, just how I'm wired and what makes the law sort of interesting to me. So I spoke to Janice from, JC Legal, and she said, look, we have a practice that's exactly like you just described. Lots of labor law, family law, shareholders disputes, wills, things like that you can work on, obviously, day in and out. And they would love to have me on board. So I then actually joined them last year in July. So that's almost another year there now, which has been a completely different experience from, the Tanner DeWitt experience. So yeah, JC Legal is a lot more local focused with many of their clients, which was really good also to sort of just work with clients that are very local, to see what their sort of ideas are about negotiations, how the business deals work around here, how to resolve disputes, because it's completely different from what we're used to in a Western sense, right? So that's where we are now.
Yeah, I think listening to your story, I think is people will get. There's a common thread. First of all, you clearly don't give up, which is testimony to your character and your upbringing and the man that you are. I mean and it's also an incredibly valuable lesson for people to learn and to take from this conversation if they are looking to follow a similar path. You've had, in recent times, you've had some of the biggest things thrown at you and the biggest hurdles that you've had to navigate and get over, and all the while doing that in the most expensive city in the world. And having to balance that. I mean, I take my hat off to you, sir. You've really done extremely well, and you must be, if you think back to the person you were 5 years ago and the person you are now, you must think, you've done some, you've done some growing up, as it were. Hong Kong will do that to you. It did it to me, and I'm sure it's done it to you as well. So, I'm looking at some of the notes you've written before we joined this call and the podcast, and I've looked at some of the things you've done, and you've kind of touched on a lot of this. The story is such a good story for people to listen to, because you're still relatively, you're certainly not at the end of your career. You're not up for that lifetime achievement award yet. You've got plenty on your journey to go yet. But coming from a legal family background, who all are, have achieved very high levels of, within the career, even like you said, one of your sisters to date is a partner at down the road here at one of the big firms, and having that internal pressure of the family, all high achievers, and and then going into that space, but making your own path as well. That is something that a lot of our listeners and a lot of the past guests have sort of expressed. They've often gone into law because their family have been in it, and then that comes with its own set of pressures, as I'm sure you felt yourself. But to have your own path, to have all of those hurdles, to keep going when really big, massive hurdles have been thrown at you about the visa, about the admissions, about having to come home and then go back again, about not being able to getting a job and then not being able to work. I think one thing that a lot of listeners have got to take from this is that you have to take control, right? You're the only person who can sort it out. You have to get out there and make things happen. You have to ask the questions. You have to pull on relationships. You have to ask people, for favors. You have to just hustle, right? I suppose.
Exactly that, Rob. I think hustle is exactly the term. And, even as I think a professional or a working professional, it was interesting to see in Hong Kong that you're thrown into this place where it forces you to be the best version of yourself. You get fit, as it were, right? So that's the one thing I realized when I spent a lot of time at home in Cape Town. I just felt myself, becoming a bit soft again, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Sense, yeah.
It's a very good lifestyle. It's much more relaxed, it's much more balanced as well. But I did miss, the grind and the hustle of Hong Kong, because there's nothing that really beats it. It feels amazing when you walk around the city and there's thousands of the people around you with the same, struggles and ideas. And that's where this support network also comes in again, Rob. I've had an amazing support network of friends here, and also my colleagues and my network, where they really sort of become your surrogate family, right? Because like you said, we don't have family here. So your friends really become like family, and they support you with loyalty like I've never seen before. It just feels like a place where you can
friends for life,
you can
really,
follow your dreams. Yeah, friends for life. And a place where you can think of what your dreams are, and just sort of follow it and see and figure out along the way how you're going to achieve them. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not for everybody, but it is for people like you and I, and I think where we can go and test ourselves, but every day is a test, and I think that's a good lesson for people to learn when they are thinking about moving overseas. If you get to London, or if you get to New York, or you get to Hong Kong, or you get to Shanghai, or you go somewhere like that, it's hard work. And you've got to be up for it. You've got to get into the grind, because those millions of people that are rushing past you on the street, they don't care about you. They don't care about what you're doing. They want to get on. And the differences between Cape Town and Hong Kong, you would have felt it one way. I felt it the other way. I moved here from Hong Kong. I couldn't believe how slow everything moved. It was deeply frustrating. I just couldn't, I spent the first year screaming at everything, and then at one point I sort of looked back and I remember saying to the wife, maybe Cape Townians have it right. Maybe this is the pace we should be going at.
Exactly.
But no, I get you. I mean, that cut and thrust. And for a young professional as well, a young lawyer, it sharpens your edges. Hong Kong's sharpening your edges as a deal maker, as a lawyer, dealing with things that you may never get thrown at you ever again if you move to a different city, and you just touched on it there. We haven't really got time to go into it too much at the moment, but you've touched on it there. The sort of the transition of Hong Kong as it moves away from being a very expat central place, a very largely American and UK banks and law firms, and moving to a much more mainland China and local-based, Asia-based city. That's also going to throw up some new challenges as you go on. I don't know how your putonghua is. Have you been practicing, or have you?
Not fantastic, but yeah. The Cantonese is all right, to get around. I also practice with my fiance, because she speaks it. So I sort of obviously try to learn a bit here and there, but it's very difficult in the sense that you can learn it as well as you want. However, most locals will sort of think, oh, that's a nice little trick, but then they'll switch over to English automatically, right? Because there's 9 intonations of saying words. So you could say the same word 9, different ways with, the different meanings. So it's incredibly difficult if you haven't been speaking it from a very young age to really get it right.
Yeah, I tried to do some Cantonese and Mandarin lessons when I was there, and I just got put off it by people who were just like, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get those 9 different intonations. And I think it's 4 or 5 with Mandarin as well, isn't it? So yeah, very, very tricky. But look, I've got a couple more questions to ask you before I let you go and enjoy your evening, your very humid evening. And I've actually driven in from the West Coast to record this today. So we're on Clove Street, which will be very familiar to you.
Yes.
But I was up on Honemanskraal with my in-laws this morning. So I've driven through, and my kids are expecting Dad to drive back. But but nice sunny day here, so very nice day to drive.
Always.
But before I let you go, I said all that to make you jealous, by the way. Just to make you miss
I am
it
very jealous now. I'd love a braai right now.
Oh yeah, well that'll be happening. I'll take a picture and send it to you later when I fire up the bribe, and we'll be thinking of you. But look, before I let you go, there's 2 things I want to ask you. One is about what you think is coming in terms of changes to the way of doing law, and one is about you and your personal future. Your next step. Apart from getting married, obviously. But in terms of Hong Kong is still top 10 city in the world. Lots of decisions are made there. Lots of business goes on. Deal size that many in South Africa and Kenya and Nigeria that listen to this podcast wouldn't have ever seen. The massive and pace of deals. Getting stuff done. Is quick. What do you see in terms of the law? Do you think there'll be some of the changes that you think might happen? Are you seeing?
I think the interesting thing to see is the death of the billable hour. Even though it's a slow death, you're seeing some firms in Hong Kong that are now working with fixed fee rates, at least for stages of work, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Because you can negotiate what the value of the case or the deal is for the client. You can obviously agree on something within reason. And then at the next sort of stage, you can talk again about what the next set of fees should be, as opposed to just running the hours on a timesheet and then the client having a rude awakening at the end, which I think a lot of clients are fed up with. And the reason why law firms want to cling, on the sort of hourly rates, I think, is a few reasons. They have massive overheads, right? They've got these fancy offices in Hong Kong where, the rent is just absolutely sky high. They've got marketing people, HR.
I used to have to pay for our office, and you transition that into rand, and you go, oh wow, I'm so pleased I don't have to pay that anymore.
Exactly.
Sorry, carry on.
And you've also got the fact where you don't have the succession that you had before. So a lot of the partners at law firms are now working well into their 70s, and they obviously earn very high salaries, right? So now you've got associates that have to help sustain the top heavy structure of a lot of these firms, and associates that have to bill 5-6 times their monthly salary month after month.
Wow.
And they don't really see the progression that they would like to see, right? I know of associates that are maybe 8 or 9 years after they've already qualified, they haven't been made a partner yet. So I'm not sure whether that's sustainable. I always ask my dad, because he's been a lawyer for 50 years. And I think in his day, there was the 1/3 rule, right? So you were expected, to bill 3 times your salary. 1/3 for you in your pocket, 1/3 is for the overheads, and 1/3 is the partner profits, which I think makes a lot of sense. It would make work-life balance a lot better. I think, the quality of your work would also be much higher because you can focus on working on a specific matter as opposed to having to go through a conveyor belt of matters to get the fees through. So that's what I'd say, really, Rob. I think the transparency needs to be higher for clients. They need to know what's what you're working on and what the price is going to be. And then, of course, AI is also going to be a massive,
Yeah.
disruptor. However, I already see clients come to me with a contract they might have drafted with AI, and when I see that, I have hope that I might have a few more years left because it's not
Yeah.
quite perfect yet.
You haven't. You're not quite getting replaced just yet. I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, someone. I read it somewhere the other day, and I'm going to ruin what they said, but it's something like, um, AI will never replace the need for a lawyer, but it will replace the lawyer that doesn't want to use AI. Or something like that, like,
Yes.
and again, I
Yeah.
mean, and again, I agreed with that because it's like anything, isn't it? If you don't embrace technology or the best parts of technology, you don't have to embrace all of it, but the best parts of it, then you're just going to end up being a dinosaur and get left behind. But there's a
Mm.
place for technology in all of this, and so yeah, no, the hybrid of fixed fee and billable hours is something that I think that, makes sense. But look, last question before I let you go. What's on the horizon for you in your career in the coming years?
Yeah. Well, Rob, I think as you've seen through my career, I've experienced many different things, right? Sales at a music shop, worked at a law firm where I was expected, to run a department from a very young age, exposure to a wide variety of, different cases, worked in financial services in Hong Kong, moved into the private practice in like Hong Kong as well. And I think for that reason, I've realized that I do like, to do a little bit of everything. And so for
Mm.
me at this stage, I'd like to learn as much as I can. And one day I'd like to work for myself, whether that's as an advocate or, the barrister, as we call them here, or whether I have my own law firm or a business consultancy firm. I think I would like to be my own boss, have my own sort of
Yeah,
vision for how I'd like to do things. I think you also know the one thing in Hong Kong is the culture of work here is sometimes very sort of rigid and strict, whereas I like to be a little bit more flexible in the way that I do things. So I think down the line, fingers crossed, if I'm still here and everything goes well, we can set something up, in Hong Kong and maybe take the
brilliant.
family name, truly international.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And but is South Africa ever going to get you back? That's the last question.
Oh, it's always tempting. I think every Sunday that I speak with my father and my mum and my
Yeah,
sisters and my nephews and my niece, and I just see the braai and the blue skies and them swimming and having a good time, it makes me miss it a lot. And I for sure get homesick. But I also hope if I have the flexibility to do my own thing one day, maybe I can spend, 3 or 4
yeah,
months of a year in South Africa. So that would be the dream.
brilliant. Well, next time you're over, let me know so I can buy you a coffee, and maybe we can have that braai that you've now made me want. That you've mentioned it 3 or 4 times. Brilliant. Well, look, Martinez, I cannot thank you enough. I think hearing your story and your journey from Cape Town, the different directions you've taken, it's really truly inspiring for a lot of the listeners. We're lucky enough to have tens of thousands of downloads now on our episodes, and the numbers are going through the roof. And the feedback we're getting from lawyers across every part of Africa is that they're getting people are getting different things from different people's stories. But your journey so far, where you've really taken chances and you've really put yourself out there, and you've pushed yourself. And it's a really inspiring story. So thanks very much for your time. Enjoy the evening in Hong Kong. Say hello to the old place for me, and we will speak very, very soon. Thanks a lot, Martinez.
Will do, Rob. Thank you very much for having me on here. It was a great experience to talk to you, and I look forward, to the next one.
Brilliant, brilliant.